The moment I saw my HOA's lawyers on my doorstep, holding papers that threatened my home, I knew it was no longer about the length of my grass. They had harassed me for years, drained my savings, and wrecked my peace of mind. But this was an act of war, and they had no idea I was ready to fight back and dismantle their entire corrupt operation. It feels like a lifetime ago, but I remember the day I bought this house like it was yesterday. After 40 years as an electrician, crawling through attics and wrestling with wires, all I wanted was a slice of quiet. A place where the loudest sound was the birds in the morning and the buzz of my own tools in my workshop. This house was supposed to be it. It wasn't fancy, just a simple 3-bedroom ranch on a decent-sized lot at the edge of a subdivision built back in the late 70s. It had a big, mature oak tree in the front yard, and enough space out back for the garden I'd always dreamed of. I'm a simple man. I don't ask for much. I paid my mortgage, paid my taxes, and minded my own business. My wife passed a few years before I retired, so my routines were my company. I'd wake up early, have coffee on the back porch listening to the world wake up, and then spend my days either tinkering in my workshop or tending to my vegetables. I wasn't just growing tomatoes. I was cultivating peace. This little plot of land wasn't just property to me. It was my sanctuary. It was the life I had earned. The neighborhood seemed perfect. People waved when you drove by, but mostly kept to themselves. I knew there was a Homeowners Association. When I bought the place, I got a thick binder full of their rules, the infamous CC&Rs. I gave it a glance. The rules seemed reasonable enough. Keep your lawn mowed. Don't paint your house purple. Don't leave junk cars on the street. I was a neat guy by nature, so I figured I'd never have a problem with them. For the first 2 years, I was right. I paid my dues, trimmed my hedges, and enjoyed the quiet life. I had no idea the very organization meant to protect property values was about to wage a systematic war to destroy my peace and, eventually, try to take the property itself. The first letter came on a Tuesday. Crisp white envelope, HOA logo in the corner. I opened it with mild curiosity, not alarm. The letter informed me that a routine inspection found my property in violation. My crime? The grass in my front yard exceeded the maximum allowable height of 4 inches. It was supposedly 4.25 inches in a few spots. I had to read it twice. 1/4 of an inch. They were citing me for 1/4 of an inch of grass. My first reaction wasn't anger, but a kind of weary disbelief. I walked out and stared at my lawn. It looked like a lawn. A perfectly normal, healthy green lawn I had mowed just 5 days earlier. We'd had some rain, and things were growing fast. I grabbed a tape measure from my workshop. Sure enough, in a few patches, the blades tickled the 4 1/4 inch mark. The pettiness was astounding. Someone, an adult, had walked onto my property with a ruler and measured my grass. But I'm not a confrontational person. My guiding principle has always been to choose my battles. This, I decided, was not a battle worth fighting. It was ridiculous, but it was an easy fix. I rolled my mower out and gave the lawn another pass. I sent a polite email to the management company, picture included, letting them know the issue was resolved. I thought that was the end of it. In retrospect, my compliance was my first mistake. It didn't signal I was a good neighbor. It signaled I was an easy target. A month later, the second letter arrived. A $50 fine. My violation? My trash bins were at the curb for more than 12 hours after pickup. Pickup was 9 a.m. on Friday. I'd been out running errands and didn't bring them in until I got home around 10 p.m. They were at the curb for 13 hours. They had fined me $50 for 1 hour. This time, I was annoyed. This wasn't about community standards. This felt like a trap. It felt like they were watching me. I paid the fine. Again, I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. But a seed of resentment had been planted. I started to feel a knot of anxiety every time I walked to the mailbox. This was just the beginning of the harassment. The $50 fine was a test to see how much I would take, and the person behind it was about to reveal herself. That's when I first met Brenda, the HOA president. I saw her at the annual meeting, a woman in her late 50s with a severe haircut and an expression that seemed permanently fixed in a state of disapproval. She spoke not like a neighbor, but like a warden addressing inmates, talking about protecting our community's integrity and enforcing the rules without exception. After the trash can incident, the letters started coming like clockwork. They were a masterclass in nitpicking. $100 fine because a small patch of paint on my window trim was faded. A $75 fine because a single branch from a bush touched the side of the house. A warning that my dark red front door was a non-conforming color, even though 5 other houses had the exact same door. I started to realize this wasn't random. It was targeted. I'd see other lawns far longer than mine and other trash cans left out for days. I was the one getting the fines. I started attending the monthly HOA board meetings, hoping to reason with them. That was a mistake. The meetings were Brenda's courtroom. When my turn came to speak, I calmly explained the situation, how these constant, trivial fines were becoming a burden for a retiree on a fixed income. Brenda listened with a smirk. When I was done, she addressed the room. "The rules are the rules for a reason," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "If you cannot afford to maintain your property to the community's standards, then perhaps this isn't the community for you." The room was silent. No one spoke up. They were afraid. I left that meeting with a cold sense of dread. This wasn't about rules. This was about power. And the harassment intensified. She started driving by my house, slowing down to stare, sometimes taking pictures. My sanctuary now felt like a fishbowl. I decided to fight back, but by the book. I started reading the HOA's own rules and California's Davis-Sterling Act, which governs HOAs. That's when I found something interesting. For an HOA to levy a monetary penalty, they had to provide notice and an opportunity for a hearing. They had never once offered me a hearing. They just sent the bills. My next fine was for $250 for a hairline crack in my driveway. I sent a certified letter to the board, pointing out that not only had they failed to follow state law by not offering a hearing, but the fine was unreasonable. I informed them I would not be paying it. Their response was to double down. A week later, a letter arrived from their law firm. My account was now delinquent, and all legal fees the HOA incurred would be added to my balance. The $250 fine had just become a $1,000 problem. It got worse. One morning, I woke up to find painters in my yard setting up ladders. The HOA had hired them to remediate the non-conforming paint. Brenda was on the sidewalk, arms crossed, smiling. I told the workers they were trespassing and threatened to call the police. They packed up and left. A few days later, another bill was added to my account, a $1,500 charge for the painter's call-out fee. The lawyers started mentioning liens and foreclosure. They were threatening to take my home. Over a quarter-inch of grass. The stress became a physical thing. It sat on my chest at night and soured my morning coffee. My hands, steady for 40 years of electrical work, now had a tremor. The joy I once felt in my home was gone, replaced by a constant hum of anxiety. Every trip to the mailbox felt like a walk to the gallows. My retirement savings were being funneled into a black hole of legal fees. I had to hire my own lawyer, who was blunt. "Look," he said, "you might be right here. But being right and winning are two different things. The HOA has a law firm on retainer, paid for by everyone's dues, including yours. They'll bury you in paperwork. Honestly, it might be cheaper to just pay them." Pay them? It was over $15,000 now. Paying them felt like letting the bullies win. But what was the alternative? I was 70 years old. I wasn't supposed to be spending my golden years fighting neighborhood tyrants. The breaking point came as a certified letter. Inside, on heavy legal letterhead, was a notice of intent to file a lien for $15,720 It stated that if the amount wasn't paid in 30 days, the HOA would place a lien on my property, which it explained could be a precursor to foreclosure. Foreclosure. The word echoed in the silent room. They were going to take my house, my home, all my work, my entire life's effort could be stolen from me because of the color of my door and the height of my grass. I sank into my armchair, the letter falling from my hand. A wave of crushing defeat washed over me. I felt utterly powerless. They had all the money and all the lawyers. My own lawyer had basically said it was a losing battle. For the first time, I seriously considered giving up. Maybe I should just sell the house. Let Brenda have her victory. Let her rule over her little kingdom of beige houses. The fight had gone out of me. I felt old, tired, and beaten. I sat in that chair for hours, feeling the weight of that foreclosure threat. Selling my home felt like the only path to peace. But as I thought about packing up my life, about leaving my garden to be paved over, something inside me shifted. A flicker of defiance grew into a hot, burning anger. This was my home. I had earned it. I was not going to be bullied out of it. They had mistaken my desire for peace for weakness. That night, I decided they were wrong. If they wanted a war, I'd give them one. But I wasn't going to trade letters with them. I was going to change the battlefield. The next morning, I drove to the county records office. I spent the next 3 weeks buried in archives that smelled of dust and time. As an electrician, my job had been to trace complex circuits and read dense blueprints. I applied that same focus to the history of my own property. I pulled the original subdivision plats from the 1970s and traced every deed and every amendment filed for our community. And then I found it. Tucked away in a mislabeled binder from 1982 was a supplemental declaration of annexation for Phase 4. My street was in Phase 4. I read the legal description of the land being annexed, and my heart stopped. There was a typo, a single, crucial clerical error in the parcel number. The boundary of the annexed land ended at the street behind my block. According to the official filed legal documents, my entire street, all 12 houses, had never been properly annexed into the HOA. For 40 years, we had been paying dues and following the rules of a club we didn't legally belong to. My hands started shaking again, but this time from vindication, not fear. This one document invalidated every fine, every warning, every threat. They had no jurisdiction. This lit a fire under me. What other secrets were they hiding? California law gives homeowners the right to inspect HOA finances. I had a new, more aggressive lawyer send a formal demand for 5 years' worth of financial records, board minutes, and all vendor contracts. Their lawyer called it a fishing expedition, but we got a court to compel them. The boxes of documents they sent were a mess, a deliberate attempt to bury us. But I had time and a purpose. With my lawyer and a forensic accountant, we pieced through the chaos. A pattern quickly emerged. The contracts for landscaping, pool maintenance, and repairs were all grossly inflated, and they were all being awarded, without competitive bids, to the same few companies. One company, Prestige Community Solutions, stood out. Their invoices were astronomical. I did a corporate search. It was an LLC formed just 3 years prior. The registered agent, the owner, was listed as a B. Jensen. Brenda's maiden name was Jensen. She had been awarding no-bid contracts to her own shell company, funneling our dues directly into her pocket. I laid all the evidence out on my dining room table. The faulty annexation document, the illegal fines that violated state law, and the financial records showing rampant self-dealing and fraud. They thought they were raiding my property, but I had just found the blueprint to dismantle their entire kingdom. The days of defending myself were over. It was time to attack. We filed a comprehensive lawsuit against the HOA and, crucially, against Brenda and every board member as individuals. The charges included harassment, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. We asked for a judgment declaring my property had never been part of the HOA, the return of all my money, and significant punitive damages. The first showdown was a hearing for a preliminary injunction to stop the HOA from taking any further action against me while the case proceeded. Brenda was there, whispering and laughing with her lawyer, as if this were all just a minor annoyance. She still thought she was untouchable. Their lawyer painted me as a troublemaker who refused to follow the rules. Then it was our turn. My lawyer stood up. "Your Honor," he began, "we are here today because of a 50-year-old fiction that has allowed the defendants to build a personal fiefdom. Funded by money they have no legal right to collect." He entered into evidence our first exhibit, a large map showing the original subdivision plat and the legal description from the 1982 annexation document. He walked the judge through it, line by line. "As you can see, Your Honor, the legal description explicitly stops at the property line of the street behind my client's home. Due to a clerical error, my client's property and his entire street were never legally made part of this Homeowners Association." A murmur went through the room. Brenda's lawyer stared at the map, his mouth slightly agape. The judge looked from the map to the document. "Do you have a response to this, counselor?" he asked. The lawyer stammered, "Your Honor, we operate under the assumption for decades." "An incorrect assumption," my lawyer cut in. "But even if they had jurisdiction, their actions would still be illegal." He then introduced the proof that they had never held the legally required hearings for their fines. The judge's expression hardened, but my lawyer wasn't done. "And why would they be so aggressive, Your Honor?" "Perhaps Exhibit C can shed some light." He produced the financial records, the no-bid contracts, the invoices, and the corporate filing for Prestige Community Solutions, listing Brenda Jensen as the owner. We have documented over $200,000 in homeowner dues being paid to a shell company owned by the HOA president herself. This isn't about property values. This is a slush fund. Brenda's face, once so smug, was now pale as a sheet. The courtroom was silent. We had shown they had no jurisdiction. Their fines were illegal, and their president was engaged in what looked like outright fraud. The judge took off his glasses. "I am granting the preliminary injunction, effective immediately," he said, his voice cold as ice. "The HOA is to have no contact with the plaintiff." "And counselor," he said, glaring at the HOA's lawyer, "I would advise your clients that, based on what I have seen here today, they are facing a degree of legal jeopardy that extends far beyond a simple civil dispute. This is one of the most egregious cases of HOA overreach and potential fraud I have ever seen." Brenda's arrogant facade had completely crumbled. She had come to court expecting to ruin my life. Instead, she had just watched me ruin hers. The injunction was the beginning of the end. News of the lawsuit, the jurisdictional error, the self-dealing, spread like wildfire. Suddenly, I wasn't the neighborhood pariah. I was a hero. My phone started ringing with calls from neighbors, all with their own stories of Brenda's harassment. My fight had given them courage. Faced with a mountain of undeniable evidence, the HOA's insurance carrier moved to settle. The terms were a complete vindication. The HOA paid back every fine, all my legal fees, plus a substantial six-figure sum in damages. They were also forced to have a court judgment entered that officially declared my property, and all the properties on my street were outside their jurisdiction forever. The financial victory was nice, but the real victory was what happened next. Empowered by the lawsuit, the homeowners organized and forced a recall election for the entire board. The meeting was held in the same clubhouse where Brenda had humiliated me. This time, the room was packed with angry homeowners. Brenda and her cronies were voted out in a landslide. The new board immediately turned over the evidence of her self-dealing to the district attorney's office, which opened a criminal investigation into fraud and embezzlement. Her little kingdom had crumbled, and she was now buried in the rubble. For me, life returned to what it was supposed to be. The anxiety was gone. I could work in my garden and feel nothing but the sun on my back. My home was truly mine again. It was no longer a prison or a battlefield. It was a sanctuary. My neighbors and I from the unannexed street threw a block party to celebrate. We weren't just a collection of houses anymore. We were a community, forged in the fire of a common struggle. They thought their petty rules could break me, but they forgot that a person's home is their castle. My fight wasn't just about my lawn. It was about the idea that power has limits and that no one has the right to steal your peace. It was a lesson that some people only learn the hard way. When you push a quiet man too far, he might just decide to push back with the full force of the law. Justice isn't always easy, and it certainly isn't cheap, but standing in my own yard, free and at peace, I can tell you without a doubt that it's always worth fighting for.